Hello. Okay, hello, people who are joining me. I just need a couple of more minutes to set up. Okay, we have 4 people already. Okay, hello. Just make sure that your sound is turned off. Don't turn it on. So it should be turned off automatically. So don't turn it on because the background noise might disrupt the other participants. So we're going to be waiting for a couple of more minutes. I'm going to prepare everything and then we will start. Okay. Can you write into the chat if you can hear me and see me well? Just give me a sign that everything is fine. Okay, thank you, okay, cool. And just a question about, hello, just a question, so you can see I'm sharing the screen, you can see it well? And can you see me at the same time? Because to be honest, I don't understand what you see from your side as a participant. Do you see both the presentation and me? Both, okay, thank you, Natalia. Okay, cool. Okay, I think we're going to be starting. Actually, we got more than 100 registrations, but of course I knew that not everyone is going to join, but still this is a very big number. So that means that the topic we are going to be talking about today is relevant for you, and I hope it will be useful. So, and yeah, the topic is job interviews for teachers, or specifically we are going to be talking about doing job interviews at the British Council. My name is Tamara Ilya, and I worked for the British Council for 6 years before I went freelance. So basically I know how the company works from the inside. And also, I'm happy to say that I will be joined today by our special guest, Christopher Holmes. He is the big boss at the British Council. He is director teaching in Ukraine and Georgia. So Chris will be happy to answer questions that you might have for him after my presentation. In terms of timing, I think that my part is going to take about 50 minutes, I think, with some time for questions at the end. And then Chris will join and we will take another 15 or 20 minutes. So in general, expect the webinar to be about an hour and 15 minutes, I think. So you, of course, can leave at any convenient time because we're going to have the recording. But make sure you stay for Chris so you can ask him questions live into the chat. Okay. Right. Okay, we have 11 people now. Yes, so I'm going to be starting. So what we're going to discuss today is I'm going to talk about the structure of the interview because, as I said in my post on Facebook, I happened to go through the job interview process when I applied for a job in Vietnam. So I remember it clearly in my head now still. And also I want to keep these memories. So that's why I decided to do this webinar. Yeah, it's a great way to process the knowledge, and also a great way to share with you. Yeah, so we're going to talk about the structure of the interview, and going to talk through the main parts. Yeah, but before, yeah, one sec. Actually, how about I try full screen? Yeah, that's much better. Okay, I can't move my slides. Just give me a sec. I can't do anything with my presentation. It's not moving. Oh, okay, great. But not great because I don't see the chat now. Sorry, guys, give me a second. Chat. Full screen. Full screen. Okay, hopefully you can see the slides well. But still, I want it to be full screen. Yes. Yeah, okay, great. So before I talk about the structure of the interview, I just want to mention two things that happened before the interview itself. So you can apply for a job at the British Council at their special website. It's jobsbritishcouncil.org. I will provide you with the link. So it's basically a portal there where you can find all jobs in the whole world, yeah. So in different British councils. So what you do there is you can apply both as external and internal applicants. I applied as, so internal means you are already working for the British Council, and external means you're not. I applied as an external applicant because I am not working for the British Council at the moment. So after you do this, yeah, when you choose the job you want, what you need to get acquainted with are the two documents. And the first document is the role profile. So the role profile is a document that you can download, and this document will have information about the job, the contract, yeah, the conditions, about the center you're going to teach in, maybe a little bit about the city. And the part that you're most interested in is the part with requirements. So what do they want from the candidate? And depending on the center, I mean, generally these requirements are more or less the same, but depending on the center, they might be a little bit different. For example, some centers are looking for, I don't know, they have lots of kids classes. So they're looking for teachers who are more experienced with children. Whereas other centers might specify in exams, specialize in exams. So it depends. Anyway, role profile is a very important document, and you should study it very carefully because the next thing you're going to do is you're going to complete your application form. And the application form consists of several parts, several pages, like with your typical contact information, yeah, information about yourself, information about your education, like in a typical CV. There is also part about your experience, and especially experience with different age groups and different levels, which you have to indicate in hours. So for example, how many hours have you worked with a particular age group? Of course, like most of us, I mean, it's not written anywhere how many hours, and we don't write this down, we don't remember this. But what you could do is you could calculate this approximately. So for example, you have a group of teenagers that happens twice a week, and the lesson is 2 hours. So that means you are doing 4 hours a week, which means you're doing 16 hours a month, and then you multiply it by the number of months you are you're teaching this group, and you will get an approximate number of hours with this group. So you can do the calculations. Yeah, of course it's all approximate. And it cannot basically be checked somehow. Okay. Yeah, and the final part of the application form, the very important part, is the supporting statement. And the supporting statement is basically the answer to the question, why are you suitable for this job? And when you're supposed to write about 500 words, which is about half a page. And in order to answer this question correctly, you have to remember about the role profile. Yeah, you have to remember about what they are looking for, so you can give them basically what they want. Yes, so you should include relevant information about yourself. Again, it also depends on what the specific center wants, and so on. So after you have applied, and if you have been shortlisted, yes, if your application form was good, you are invited to an interview. An interview takes place face-to-face or on Skype, depending on where you are, on Zoom actually. There are 2 interviewers, and the whole process takes about 2 hours. Oh, sorry, 1 hour. I got distracted by the chat. Yeah, about 1 hour. So now I will talk you through the, let's look at what the interview consists of and what exactly the interviewers expect to hear from you. Sorry. Yeah, just a sec. So the first part, as you can imagine, is the general information about yourself. It takes about 5 minutes, I would say. So basically, again, this is similar to this supporting statement that you wrote in your application form. And this is, so they might ask you a question, why are you suitable for this job? Or why do you want to apply for this job, which is basically the same. So make sure you're ready with an answer to this, an answer that includes relevant information to this position. In today's presentation, we are going to concentrate on the following 2 parts. The second part is where they ask you about your teaching skills. And we're going to look at what exactly teaching skills they are going to assess. And the final part is where they assess your behaviors. And again, you might not know what a behavior is, and to be honest, I didn't know that either before I started working for the British Council. So when 6 years ago I applied for a teaching position here in Kiev, it was actually hard. I was lucky that I had my CELTA tutor who was working at the British Council at that time, Jerry McIntosh, and he told me a little bit about behaviors, but still it was so vague. I didn't exactly understand what it meant and what they were looking for. So I hope that what I'm going to be telling you today will help you and will clear that for you. After they have assessed your teaching skills and behaviors, they will also ask you if you have any questions for them, and be sure that you have a couple. But we're not going to concentrate on this today. So let's move on to the teaching skills, the first part. Yeah, the teaching skills. So online, there is a document that is available to general public that if you Google teaching British Council teaching skills, you will find it. I will also give you a link to it later. So basically, this is a document that describes the major teaching skills. And also what you can find there is this tool. Don't worry if you cannot see all the letters here. Yeah, I'm gonna talk you through this. As you can see, I think you can see this, is that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 major teaching skills. And each teaching skill is divided into sub-skills. So the teaching skills here are classroom management, course and lesson planning, understanding young learners, subject knowledge, and learning technologies. As you can see, classroom management is divided into some sub-skills, and I'm going to read some out for you. So for example, it's managing the learning environment, managing interaction, managing the lesson and activities, and so on. And in the handbook that you can download, each teaching skill and each sub-skill are described in more detail, and I'm going to show you a page from that handbook now. So for example, this is the description, just drawing. This is a description of the classroom management teaching skill. And as you can see, the sub-skills are the following. So for example, managing the learning environment, and you can see the description. Each sub-skill has got 3 levels. I have here included only 2, just for you to see better, but there are 3. So there is essential level, the more demanding level, and the most demanding. The teaching skills for a position of just a teaching position usually are assessed at the essential level. If you're applying for a head teacher, you might need to show signs of a more demanding or even the most demanding level. So let's see, for example, we have managing the learning environment, and what you must have, like the essential level, is you must be able to set up the classroom in a way that facilitates learning. You use an appropriate variety of resources and equipment to facilitate learning. You demonstrate sensitivity to the safety and well-being of students. The more demanding level would be varies the classroom setup in a way that is appropriate to the learners and activity, uses a wide variety of resources and equipment effectively, ensures a safe and supportive learning environment. So basically what you have to do is you have to read through each skill and each sub-skill, and you can have a highlighter pen and highlight all the keywords. So you understand clearly what each skill and sub-skill entails. So for example, if we look at this sub-skill, it's about managing your classroom, it's about the resources you use and the equipment, and it's also about creating a safe and supportive learning environment. And this is a big deal at the British Council, I would say. Child protection. Yeah, so when we're talking about young learners, which means your first and foremost concern is to ensure that your kids are safe, even before you think about their learning. If we look at managing interaction, the next sub-skill, you will see that the keyword, so it's about staging the lesson, it's about pair and group work, it's about the balance between teacher and learner talking time, right? It's about teachers' roles and so on, yeah? So I will give you the link to that. You can download and get yourself acquainted with all these sub-skills. Moving on, yeah. So after you have got yourself acquainted with the sub-skills, what I suggest you do is you use this fantastic tool to evaluate where you are at each subskill. So you remember that the number one, yeah, is essential level, then number two is more demanding, three is most demanding. So for example, you see, okay, managing the learning environment, let's say I'm at the most demanding level, I'm very good at this, fantastic. Managing interaction, I am quite good at this, so I would say that I am at the more demanding level. And what I do, yeah, so I put dots on the scale from 1 to 3 for each subscale, and what I have in the end is, I don't know, a kind of a flower or a wheel. So you might, yeah, you can just continue these lines for the rest of the subskills. So this is not only good for evaluating yourself, this can also be used for setting goals for the future. So you can take another color of a pen or a pencil and draw another, like a second wheel. Now thinking about where you want to be, for example, for the next academic year. And when I worked at the British Council, we did this at the beginning of every year. Yeah, so to evaluate ourselves and to set goals for the next academic year. Are you following so far? Can you please write into the chat if everything is clear, if there are no technical problems and so on? Okay, thank you, Mila. I'm sorry. Okay, so let's continue then. So based on the descriptions in this handbook, you can already predict some of the questions that the interviewers will ask. And the next thing we're going to do is we are going to look at some sample questions that are supposed to assess your teaching skills. Okay, so these are the questions that I have either found online or questions that I heard from colleagues of mine who have done interviews, or even questions that I was asked during the interview. Yeah, so let's look at them. For example, tell us about a time when something went wrong with your teaching plan. Tell us about a difficult student you had. Tell us about a time your feedback helped a student. What would you do if two learners started fighting? How do you create a positive learning environment? Tell us about a lesson that went particularly well. So basically, as you can see, these questions are supposed to test one skill or a couple of them. So for example, how do you create a positive learning environment? This is supposed to be testing your classroom management skills, and especially the first sub-skill that I was reading out loud, yeah, managing the learning environment. Yeah, like what would you do if two learners started fighting? This is kind of also classroom management, or also can fall under the category of understanding your learners, which is another skill from the handbook. Also, as you can see, most of the questions will start with with a cue like tell us about a time when, or they will ask you to imagine a situation. What would you do if? Or just ask you how do you do something. So on the next slide, I have two sample answers, and I'm going to give you a minute to look through them. And what I want you to think about is what question was asked, what question are they answering, and also which answer do you like more? There are two, A and B. Okay, here they are. So take a minute to read through. and choose the one you like more. Okay, Ludmila likes the second more. Okay. Let's wait for the other people to say what they think. Tanya is saying that it's a question about how your feedback helped your student. B is better, it gives specific strategy. Okay. Somebody likes A. Yeah, so can I ask you now to write why you think, why you think A is better or B is better? The second one, it's more specific. A personalized strategy. Okay. Okay, so yeah, correct answer is B, and not only because it's longer, but also because of some other things. And on the next slide, I have a hint of, I'm going to show you something that symbolizes the way you should structure your answers at a job interview. And again, in the chat, write if you know what I'm talking about. What does this little, the star approach, okay, Luna? So somebody said the star approach. Do you guys know what the star approach is? Okay, not really good. No. Somebody knows, somebody doesn't, which means it will be useful for you. So the STAR approach to answering interview questions. So the STAR is an abbreviation where S stands for situation, T for task, A for action, and R for result. And when you go through the interview process, the interviewers explicitly ask you to follow the STAR model. So when I got my invitation for the interview, this was mentioned even in the email, although I knew it beforehand, but they reminded me about that. So what exactly does that mean? They basically give you a situation where when they tell you, for example, about tell us about a time when two learners started fighting, or tell us about how you give feedback to your students. So this is the situation. Let's say you need to then speak about what your task was. Yeah. So for example, if two learners started fighting, your task is to stop this. Yes, and your task is to understand what is going on. And then your action is like, so now you're talking about the actions that you take specifically in order to solve this conflict at the moment or maybe in future classes. Yeah, so how do you generally approach this, and the result? So what is the result apart from, the good result would be learners stop fighting, right? And maybe what happens in the future? Maybe they become friends, best friends, So in the example that we had here, so the situation is learners, a student of mine wanted to improve vocabulary. So the task is to help them do that. But the problem is, so also maybe it's the situation. He's writing long lists of words, which is hard to retain. So my task is to help him do it better. And here I describe how exactly I did it. And the result is the test results were 40% better, which is here, what they especially like is when you give numbers or at least approximate percentage. Yeah, so here I said 30% and the results improved by 40%, which is what they like. Yeah, so numbers. Or I don't know, like you had 10 students who were attending your course, but then you did something and it attracted more students to your course. Okay, yeah, so the STAR model. Again, does this make sense? So what they ask you is to be as specific as possible. Yeah, instead of just saying some vague things, you need to be specific. Okay, then, so if that's clear, we are going to move on to the next part. And the next part is where the assessment of your behaviors happens. So what is a behavior? Let's look at what I have found online. Employee behavior is defined as an employee's reaction to a particular situation at workplace. So basically, again, you have some kind of situation. How do you react to that? There is a document that is available to general public, which is called British Council Behaviors, and you can download it easily. That describes the same as teaching skills. It describes the behaviors. I will just tell you that there are 6 behaviors. The first one is creating shared purpose, connecting with others, working together, being accountable, making it happen, and shaping the future. The 2 I have underlined are the 2 that are assessed during the interview process. The other ones are also assessed, but they might be assessed, for example, through your application form. So working together and making it happen. If you look at the handbook, you will see something like this. Again, you will see that there are 3 levels: essential, more demanding, and most demanding. What's going on? Who's drawing again? I don't know how to stop this. Anyway, so these are the levels, and the levels that you are supposed to have for all the behaviors is the essential level. So let's look at so here we have the description of the behavior. So let's see, what does it mean, making it happen? I deliver excellent results, achieve challenging goals, and develop myself and others. I do this by setting clear and demanding objectives to deliver what is required. I stay focused on measurable outcomes while building longer-term capability. I demonstrate standards of excellence and deliver value for money. I measure progress and adapt plans when necessary. Then, after you've done this, let's look at the essential level. Yeah, delivering clear results for the British Council. Do I take action promptly when necessary? Do I consistently meet my objectives? Do I develop my own knowledge, expertise, and learning? Do I actively support the learning and development of others? Do I set myself and others clear goals and high standards? Do I willingly take on challenges? So you can also then read the more demanding level, because it helps to look through all the levels just to get a better feel of where you are now. As you can see, this particular behavior is about setting goals for yourself and meeting them, and also measuring your progress. Yeah, so basically, yeah, it's goal setting, very similar to that as far as I understand it. The other behavior is working together. One moment. Yeah, working together. So let's read about it. Knowing that we will achieve more with other people than we can do separately. by sharing goals and resources to add more value. I work towards common goals with others. I do this by agreeing effective and respectful ways of sharing success. I generate mutual support, shared benefits, and promote interdependence. So I think this speaks for itself. Working together is working together, working with other people. For us as teachers, like many of us, usually, like if we work together with someone, it's most of the time these people are our students, which also counts. But you shouldn't forget that you work, like if you work in a school, you also have your colleagues, you also have your management, and this is very important. So this is also a sphere from which you can draw examples. So again, I'm gonna send you the link to this document, or you can just Google British Council behaviors and read through everything very carefully. Again, highlighting the keywords to understand what exactly a behavior is about. And then based on all these descriptions, we can kind of predict the questions. So for example, if the making it happen behavior is about, so do I take action promptly when necessary? So the question might just sound, tell us about a time when you took action promptly, or tell us about a time you took on a challenge and succeeded. Or maybe tell us about the time you took on a challenging project but failed. Yeah, so that's also important. And what did you do later with that? So let's look at some sample questions that I prepared for us. Yeah, so for example, tell us about a time when you took on a challenge. Tell us about how you request and use feedback. Tell us about the time you changed your view as a result of others' input. And there are other possibilities. It's impossible to predict all the questions that might come up, but what you need to do is you need to generally understand what the behavior is about. And then what you need to do is you need to think of some situations from your experience where you demonstrated this behavior, or that can serve as examples of this behavior. So on my next slide, I'm going to show you some of these. Sorry, I don't have sample answers for that, but I have some more answers later that I will show you. Yeah, so my main tip, what I wanted to say is you cannot possibly predict all the questions. So that's why what you need to do is you need to think of minimum, let's say, 5 different success stories that you might adapt for different questions, because one story can show you from different sides. So it can show how good you are at giving feedback, or it can show how good you are at reacting promptly to a challenge that came up, and so on and so forth. Yeah, so your task is to come up with these stories and also be imaginative enough to understand how you might adapt these stories to different questions. Then my other tip is to think of at least one good lesson and one lesson that didn't go well. As I was told by one of the colleagues, he was asked about, so talk us through a successful lesson you recently gave. So be prepared with that. Then think of at least 3 activities that you usually do with your students. Take into account different systems and skills, and also different contexts. Yeah, think of a variety of contexts, because they can ask you. So, like, I mean, usually what British Council wants is for you to be able to deliver classes for any level and any age group. So if your examples during the interview are only connected to, let's say, young learners, and you don't give any examples connected to adult groups, this is a bit imbalanced, right? So you should think of a variety of contexts. As for the 3 activities, yes, think of an activity you do to practice vocabulary, an activity like a speaking activity or your favorite writing activity, and be prepared to be able to explain how you set this activity up, how you think about times like real lessons in which you did this activity and how it went and what was the reaction and how do you know that this activity is helpful. So again, remember to be as specific as possible. Yep. So do you have any questions so far? How clear is that? Okay, I don't see your question. So how about we move to the next slide, and there I have prepared 3 answers for you. So 3, let's say, success stories. So again, I'm gonna give you a minute to read through them and think about how you could adapt these stories to different questions. So what do these stories illustrate? Do they like illustrate only one thing, or can we use them for different contexts? Yeah, so some text here, so take your time to read through. I can see some comments. Working together, making it happen. Yeah, we can twist it. Okay, so Ludmila is saying that the blue text, for example, is about understanding your students, yeah, the teaching skill, right? Yeah, let's look at, for example, the blue text, yeah? So what kind of questions can it be good for? Can it serve as an answer to? So yeah, it can be, for example, how there was a question about how did your feedback, tell us about a time when your feedback helped a student, right? However, it can also be used as an answer to the question, for example, tell us about a memorable student you had. Or even tell us about a difficult student you had, because what you can, like I don't recommend, well, I definitely do not recommend lying at the interview or just inventing stories, because what can happen is that you just, you forget, you lose track of your story, and you cannot think of relevant details, and it's clear that you're lying. So you're definitely like, don't do that. But what you can do is you can sugarcoat the truth a little bit, or you can mix a couple of stories into one. or you can add some details. So for example, you can say that this student was particularly difficult student and he resisted, he wanted grammar, but I had to really insist on my point of view and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So you can make him a really difficult student, for example. Any other ideas? What, like if we take the blue text as an example, what questions might it answer? Mm-hmm. Yes, Luda. Again, it can be used as, for example, tell us about the time you took on a challenge. Yeah, so it can be considered a challenging student. For example, I don't know. Yeah, because preparing somebody for Stanford is quite challenging. So why not to use it as an example? So I think you get my point. Yeah, you need to prepare stories that can be tweaked and twisted to serve your needs and to answer a variety of questions. Yeah, so let's recap before we move on. What you need to, like the two documents you need to get yourself acquainted with is British Council Teaching Skills and British Council Behaviors. Use the tool to assess your teaching skills, read through all of them, highlight the keywords, understand what they want, like what they mean, and then prepare some success stories. And again, these success stories, even if you're not going to do an interview soon, believe me, this is very useful, and you can use it for self-promotion even, yeah, for getting new students. Because, you know, usually we forget how many things we have already done. A good advice that somebody gave me is to actually write everything down once it happens. So for example, I did this webinar today and I need to somewhere make a note of it. So next time, for example, I'm doing an interview or something like that, I can say that I went through the job interview process, but then I didn't just leave it. I decided to do a webinar. I decided to share with the people and I got positive feedback, and I can provide you with some evidence, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so because, you know, like maybe half a year after this webinar, I will have forgotten perhaps that I have done it. Yeah, so it's good to write everything down, to note everything, and it's also good to look back and reflect on what you have already done. And you will, because first, you know, you think, ah, no, I don't have any success stories, but then you actually sit down and you will remember them, I promise. Yeah, good idea. Yeah, exactly. I don't always remember about it, but I need to do it. Yes. Like it's a good idea to get feedback from your students every now and then, or when you're finishing a course with them in writing. Yeah. So it's stored somewhere in your email box. You can find it anytime. Okay. So we are gonna soon be joined by Chris. But before we are, we have maybe 5 minutes for Q&A. Do you, yeah, a diary of a teacher, yes. Do you have any questions now that maybe I can answer? Because when we are joined by Chris, you will also be able to ask him about something. But now, if you have any questions for me. It's been very useful. Okay, I'm very glad. But actually, I'm going to ask you to complete a feedback form. So after this webinar is over, I will send you the link to the feedback form, because I told you I'm now going to save everything. So please complete the feedback form. later. And also, after you do this, I will send you some useful links. Do they look at your age at the interview? Oh, yes, Tanya, I have your question. Like, I read it in the form, and I have some questions that you have written in the form before the webinar, and there was a question about ageism. So I just want to say that the youngest person working for the British Council was maybe like, I don't know, 17 years old. He wasn't a teacher, it was an usher, like an assistant. And maybe the youngest teacher was like 23 or something. And the oldest person, I don't remember how old he was, but 70 at least. So that's just to answer your question about ageism. I don't think it exists there, really. Yeah, so, yeah, sure. You know, one of the values, the core value, like, also if you prepare for the interview, it's good to read about the British Council as a company. If you've never worked or heard about it before, they have their values. And one of the values is diversity, which means they welcome people of all nationalities, of all genders, of all ages. And if they don't, like they will, so they cannot go against their own values. So you are safe in this respect here in this company. Should you ask about the salary? Yes, I know, Luda. Yeah, I know. Should you ask about the salary? Usually it's stated in the role profile. Yeah, so it's stated there how much you're going to be getting per hour if you're an hourly paid teacher, or your gross salary if you are a full-time teacher. Really, I think it depends on how good you are as a candidate and not your age. And Chris is here. One moment, Chris, I'm gonna turn the sound on, but I cannot do it.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, you've done it.
So yeah, hi Chris.
Hi.
We're just on time. We have moved to the part with the questions, and we were now discussing the question about ageism. Does it exist in the British Council? What's your answer?
About age?
Yeah, like ageism. Do you choose people by their age? Does age play a big part? And is it possible that you would not hire a candidate just because he was too old or too young?
No, I mean, that shouldn't be a relevant factor at all.
Yeah.
I think, hi everyone, if I may just start very, very briefly, because anything I do say now, I realize that I'm kind of in a position where I may be viewed as being the British Council. I'm not the British Council, okay? And I don't represent the British Council and all of their beliefs. I am a director of teaching for Ukraine and Georgia, or I am the director of teaching. And of course I work within a British Council framework, but just like any other person, I am a person myself, and I bring my own experience and thoughts and beliefs to recruitment as well. So I think no matter what I say today, you will not be able to use it as evidence when applying for a job in Hong Kong, quoting me saying, well, this is the way that the British Council does it. Clearly, there are going to be differences across different countries.
But it is still very nice that you joined, because we just want to get another perspective.
Sure.
Yeah? So the more people we have that who have worked or are working for the British Council, the better. And yeah, we're not going to blame everything on you.
Yes, so yeah, I appreciate that, and I want to be involved, and I think that, you know, if I can offer something useful, then that will be good for people. So yeah, that's very much the spirit in which I come to this meeting.
Okay, cool then. So Chris, I have prepared some questions for you.
Okay.
So maybe we'll start with them, and you guys can be writing more questions into the chat. I will be checking the chat. Yeah, so these are the questions that I have prepared for Chris. I hope they will be relevant for many of us. Yeah, so shall we go through them?
Okay, I'll attempt not to talk forever and just interrupt me if I'm taking too long. Obviously, you shared these with me beforehand, so that means that I've had some time to think about.
Cool.
Name three things
As was
that
the
you're looking
interview.
for.
You
Yeah, exactly.
prepare before, yeah.
Well, funnily enough, that will be one of my things, but that probably won't surprise you. So, three things that you're looking for in a potential candidate. I think first and foremost, as you would expect, I would like and expect a relatively sound knowledge of the subject area, so language awareness, and that clearly is something that we would question any interviewee about, and also methodology. So, you know, does the applicant have an idea of kind of some of, you know, depending on the level, you know, if you've been teaching for 20 years, I would expect something slightly different. If you've only just passed your CELTA, I would expect something else, but still, I would expect some ideas around methodology and some familiarity with that. And I think connected with that, I'm looking for people that are perhaps what I would regard as a reflective practitioner, i.e. somebody that thinks about what they do, who you know, reflects on what goes well in their lessons, what doesn't go so well, and ultimately somebody that perhaps doesn't believe that they now know everything about teaching, or indeed somebody that believes that they don't know anything, although hopefully they wouldn't be a anyway. I'm looking, secondly, I think for a passion somewhere. And that may be in relation to the learners themselves. It may be about teaching. It may be about the British Council, but there's often a question within the interview where you see the applicant or interviewee's eyes light up, or they become animated about something. And, you know, if there was no moment like that, then it comes across as very flat. And I think, you know, what I'm looking for is people that love doing what they're doing. So I think that normally a question will provoke that in some way, but it's important, I think. And I mean, no doubt in the bit that you've done up until this point, you've probably talked a little bit about British Council behaviours. I think that there's no mystery around behaviours, to be quite honest. As far as I'm concerned, it's just kind of the way that you are. It's how you behave in the world. And, you know, whilst we want good, technically good teachers who know lots and lots about language awareness and we also want people that are going to be just good people to have in a staff room and contribute positively. And how can you do that? Well, you can do it by working well with other people, for example. So that's obviously a behavior, but it is more about you. And could I imagine having you in my staff room?
Now, like, it makes me think of another question for you related to behaviors. Can you, you're saying it's just about being a good person, then can a candidate use examples from, not from his working life, but from his, for example, personal life, how you helped a friend or how something else? Do you, like, is this relevant?
It is, and often when someone's struggling for an answer, I may ask them to kind of, I'll give them a prompt and think, well, if you don't have an example, and I mean, obviously it's very difficult if somebody hasn't worked in a staff room before to be able to give a relevant example. However, the more relevant it is, the better it's going to be.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, I think wherever possible, try to draw on your actual experience. I'd never hire a candidate if they didn't have that passion or that desire. And I think that one way that can also come across is, you know, as you've already mentioned before, if they're not prepared, you know, I mean, if you haven't read the role profile, I mean, I don't expect you to understand everything that's written in the role profile, because sometimes there can be a lot of kind of British Council speak, but I would expect you to have read it and kind of know what it is that you'd like to know more about, or something that you didn't understand. And that very quickly comes across, you know. Don't ask questions for the sake of it, just because you're expected to ask a question. At the end, ask a question that you're genuinely interested about. And if you've done the right preparation, surely at some point, something has come up that you're not sure about or that interests you. So yeah, I think it's about kind of preparation, not knowing what's being looked for.
Mm-hmm.
I'd hire someone even if they don't have 2 years experience, which leads me on to the next question. In the past, you've had, I think there's a bit of confusion about that, and this comes to me from my past experience. Prior to being a teaching centre manager at the British Council, I was a teacher, senior teacher, ADOS, director of studies, trainer, Delta trainer, etc. And what I noticed was that somebody that has X number of years experience before doing the CELTA and then does the CELTA and uses the CELTA, or the Trinity TESOL, which would be totally acceptable as well, or if you're based in Ireland, then their version of that. But I find that just as I did, when I had been teaching before I took the CELTA, everything kind of began to fall into place a little bit when I did the CELTA. It kind of made a lot of sense, and I knew instantly, that's why I have been doing that, or that's why that's going wrong. And it's probably at that moment in time that I was pretty confident and pretty good in what I did up until the level of CELTA. Whereas somebody who starts off doing CELTA and then goes away and does 2 years and kind of develops loads of ideas about stuff that may or may not be what we'd be looking for, I would say that in some ways there's more value in the first person. So I think any hang-ups about kind of whether the experience needs to be before or after the CELTA, I don't think is totally relevant. Okay. Obviously we are looking for the CELTA or an equivalent, and if you've got a year's experience, or even if you are fresh off the CELTA but have done well, we in Ukraine would consider you, and they would in British councils in many other countries around the world. But it all then comes down to the question of kind of how much competition is there, how choosy can the individual centre be. And if you looked at somewhere like Barcelona, I mean, the reality is that they don't have many vacancies. They have loads of people in Barcelona already wanting to teach for British Council Barcelona. Therefore, they can afford to be a bit choosier and can kind of follow by the guidelines their guidelines rather than rules. Because what we will do, if we get the right person and they don't have the right experience, there's lots of things that we can do to work with that person, and lots of things that we do. So, we will typically put you on the TILEC, which is the Young Learner qualification within a year of starting with us. We'll take you through our basic Young Learner training. We will also take you through our basic adult training. We'll assign you a mentor. You'll be in inset sessions each month or week or whatever the thing is. So yeah, I'd rather kind of hire people for potential and attitude, and then fill in the experience or whatever it is that they need. Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. There was another question about, I think it was a question addressed to me about the benefits of working for the British Council. And I just want, you just mentioned training and insets. And I wanted to say that, first and foremost for me, the British Council was about the people I worked with. This amazing staff room where you can share and share ideas and get new ideas and get support. And the second thing that is cool about working for the British Council is the amount of training that you get. Every Friday there is a training session, and you also help to obtain some formal qualifications.
Yeah, I think it's obviously not the only organisation that does that, and I worked for IH for many years, and that was also very good, but it does depend on the particular affiliate or branch of International House, as it does with everywhere. And I think when you're in an interview, you want to be asking questions about that kind of thing. And I think
that's
not clear from the role profile. Yeah. I think one other thing I will kind of mention in terms of Ukraine is that because we are committed to kind of anything from, of course, cultural relations, but I mean we're committed to being totally transparent, totally legal. And I know that from the point of view of some of the teachers that have joined us recently, the fact that everything is all above board, that we do really report how much you actually earn and this kind of thing. I think one benefit is that you're totally legal, which I think can be important to some people. So I think, you know what you're getting, and you can feel confident that things are being done correctly. And I think that for some people, in certain circumstances, that might be important.
Mm-hmm. Sure, I think it's important for many of the people in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Thanks. Guys, do you have any questions for Chris? There is a question from Tanya. She's asking if CELTA grade matters when you hire new teachers, but I don't think it does. Correct me if I'm wrong. But the fact that you have done your CELTA is already an important thing.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I mean, first and foremost, the key thing is that you've done the CELTA. I think where it might become important is, we would have to look beyond just the grade. So my own experience of teacher training tells me that someone that gets a pass but has never taught before and has got that pass potentially could have a lot more potential than somebody who's taught for 15 years and gets a B. So I think that what you need to do is to be able to kind of understand you may read between the lines of the CELTA tutor, but of course also we're very well connected with our own teacher trainers, and of course we'll talk to them informally about the kind of things that I've already been discussing. What is the person like? How do they act under pressure?
Mm-hmm.
Is there potential there? What's behind the grade that they ended up getting? So I think it's a starting point for a mini investigation. Of course, we do talk to other teacher trainers that have worked with applicants as well. So it doesn't necessarily have to be with our own teacher training program. But it is an indication of somebody's potential, I think. So we wouldn't ignore it, but it's not the be all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Having said that, I don't want people to obsess about the grade. I don't think that's a healthy thing when you're on the CELTA. The main thing is to learn, and then, with the right approach, I think, because I have trained people that are super focused on their grade as if that's going to make all the difference in the world in the long run.
Yeah, besides it's sometimes even more than, so getting an A doesn't necessarily mean you are the best teacher in this world, or you will act in a particular way in the real classroom. Yeah.
Did you get an A?
Yes, I did.
You may be offended by the next thing I said, but I mean, somebody who gets an A could be a fantastic teacher. They may have a lot of experience, they may be brilliant, or they may be just very good at following exactly what the tutor wants them to do.
Yeah, that's true. That's about like being a good student in general. Yeah, like doing everything on time, being organized, like maybe, I don't know, time management. It involves some other skills. So, right. Yeah. But still, of course, it's nice to be getting this validation from.
Of course, yeah. Absolutely. And I think it's very hard sometimes to get a high grade if you have taught for a long time beforehand, because you've kind of got to undo any habits that you've got into that are not directly in line with what the expectations of the course are.
Mm-hmm, that's true. Okay, we have a question here. Do BC really expect you to be jack of all trades? I mean, teaching all learners everything. Because we touched a little bit upon this, and I said that it's a good selling point for you. I mean, for the teacher to be able to teach a variety of ages and levels.
Yeah, I think largely, depending on the size of the center and the number of students that they have, which is what I would say determines the size of the center. If you're going to be applying for a full-time job, if you think about it, it's often going to be quite difficult to give you 24, 25 hours of teaching if you can only teach, for example, adults, which is one of the more common things that we have, because adults tend to come in the evening. And so even if you had 3 hours of evening work each weekday, that would only add up to 15 hours. And the job of the director of studies, or in the case of me, the teaching centre manager or deputy teaching centre manager, needs to fill your timetable. So I think it's not an expectation that you are already a jack of all trades, or indeed an expert in all areas, but that you either have some experience or you have a willingness to try out different age groups. And I think wrongly, a lot of the time we kind of lump all young learners into one group. And I think it probably helps to break things down in terms of, in your mind, of course, adults in terms of general English, business English, and EAP, so English for academic purposes and English for specific purposes. So all of those elements, you know, it'd be good to kind of have a think about what you can offer in each of those areas. But also, you know, if we're talking about young learners, in your mind, you know, whereas I might be very happy to teach, or at least have a go with secondary, and particularly upper secondary, for whatever reason, I may not feel quite so comfortable with early years or preschool, or indeed primary. And, you know, again, you might break that into lower primary, which I would regard as kind of up to about 7 or 8 years of age, and then upper primary, which is, you know, between 8 and 11. So I think it is about kind of thinking, what is it that you've done? What do you feel very comfortable with and confident with? And where are your strengths likely to lie? And I think sometimes life experience can help you with that, because since having had a child, I've begun to understand early years people a bit more than I did.
Early years.
They're not quite as crazy or scary as I thought, but yes, up until that point, I was pretty confident that that was not an age group I wanted to teach. But, you know, if you're sat in an interview saying, well, I can't do this and I can't do that, I wouldn't want to do that, you know, you're talking yourself out of a job, really.
Okay, thanks a lot. And I thought about one more question for you, maybe the last one, because I don't see any questions in the chat, so okay. I don't know. So you expect people to have a CELTA when they join the British Council, that's clear. But then, as far as I know, you can provide sponsorship for people to get a Delta. How does that work? Who can get the sponsorship, and what exactly do they need to do?
Well, in the case of Ukraine, and it does differ depending on which centre you're in and which region. British Council kind of carves the world up into about 5, 6, 7 different regions. So each different region has its own scheme. Here, what we do is we support somebody fully through the Delta, or almost fully through it. So I think that's a recognition of the fact that, you know, it's a very expensive qualification, and people, you know, in general cannot afford to do that themselves. So what we're looking for is a certain amount of post-CELTA experience or time with us, where we can clearly identify the potential of that person, the performance of the person. You know, are they showing an aptitude for following the Delta or not? And then in recent years, or in the last couple of years anyway, what I have felt is that it's better, if possible, to get people going through the Delta together. So we may select 2 or 3 people. We would ask for expressions of interest. Those expressions of interest come in. We identify those that we believe have the most potential. We work out how much we can afford in terms of paying for it. And then we would indeed kind of pay for the vast majority of the actual course. And we would encourage them to do the distance Delta, which is the, possibly you've heard of it, it's a joint product between International House London and British Council. And we want our teachers to do it as a cohort, i.e. all going through it together at the same time to support one another. And of course, then we provide, wherever possible, a local tutor for those people, depending on how familiar you are with how the distance Delta works. That basically means having somebody that works with you on the ground, even though a lot of your input comes online. But I mean, the reality sometimes is that people want to do it their own way. Maybe they would like to do module 1 as opposed to module 2, and then we kind of have to break it down on a a case-by-case basis. But the idea is that if we can create a cohort of people working together, then they can support one another. I think, there are huge positives with that, because I think studying the Delta is quite hard. Often, unless you've got a background in academic writing in English, it can be quite challenging. So kind of creating a support group of people that can be hugely beneficial.
How many people can you support in one academic year?
About 3 or 4 generally.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Which is, a reasonable. I mean, we're lucky at the British Council because we do have a lot of people that already have the people coming in as newly qualified teachers, so they're clearly not ready for it. So, in this past year, pretty much anyone that wanted to do it did do it. And, but it's not easy. And some people have struggled with it, but, that we understand as well. If you need to retake part of it, we wouldn't normally cover that. But, that's because we see ourselves as having, made a commitment, quite a large financial commitment. And therefore, the extra expenditure of the retake is not massive, but I think, there's an incentive there for someone to take on some of the financing themselves at that point.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, okay. I don't think we have any more questions coming from the participants, so I just want to thank you, Chris, for joining us.
Okay. It's a pleasure. I was kind of thinking about behaviors and stuff and thinking about working together. You've probably been through some examples or whatever already, but just one point is that I think that anyone that has joined a group such as this, Teachers for Teachers, and has been involved and has made a contribution in some way, I think speaks volumes about their commitment to their profession and their job and what they're doing. And I think speaks, as I said, volumes. So it's definitely the kind of thing that I would include. Particularly if somebody's made a contribution. So, okay, it's probably not enough to just turn up to all the events that you put on and just do that. But if you've ever made a contribution, if you've ever furthered the cause of Teacher for Teachers, or you've been an active member in some way, I think that would be exactly the kind of thing that we would...
or have posted about what you've learned on social networks, which is, I mean, this sounds funny, but it's not. I know that some of the teachers really process all the information they get during the training, and then they give it out in the form of so basically it's a review, which is very nice, or something that they try out after the training sessions, and then they write the review of how it all went. So basically, they process it very well in this way. And I think this could be definitely included as a demonstration of behavior.
Yes, reflect, yes. And therefore, and through your reflection, hopefully contribute to other people's learning as well. Because I think that's it. I mean, if it's just for yourself, that's of course very beneficial and allows you to reflect. But if you can some way kind of support the community and benefit others, then that truly is working with others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you guys write down the fact that you took part in this webinar today.
Ludmila gets lots of points for nice welcomes and observations. I'm sure everybody else does too.
Yeah.
All right.
So thank you, Chris. Thank you guys for being here. So I just wanted to show you one of the final slides. If you could complete this feedback form, so you can take a photo of the QR code and it will take you directly there, or you can just remember this link, tiny.cc/feedbacktft. I will also send the link in my email. So as I said, feedback is important. I want to keep it and use it as evidence for my behaviors. So please do it. And yes, and please get in touch. Keep in touch. So I'm Tamara Ilya on Facebook, and Teachers for Teachers is tft.kiev, and I'm also trying to run our Instagram account at tft.ua. I hope we will be able to do useful webinars in the future. with interest, like be inviting interesting guests. So once again, thank you to everyone. Thank you, Chris. See you soon.
Pleasure. See ya.
Yeah. Bye bye. Okay. Thank you, Luda. Bye bye.